And so my first like question for you is, what made you want to focus on digital transformation, and why does digital transformation, and I'm just gonna lump it in with like a big IT projects, like why do those usually like fail, go over budget, don't actually give the results that were, aspired to?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So for that exposure, it actually probably matters for me to go way back to running that family business. So it was a food franchise, and while my father figured out how to run a small business, by hook or by crook, he he really struggled with the technology that was being rolled out throughout the entire company. Super well intentioned technology, and he didn't have a whole lot of say in it because your user is not your buyer, and that is actually absolutely the case for most enterprise and just B2B technology generally. So I became his IT support. It's part of the reason why I became good with computers, that I had to figure it out for him. And I could see time and time again the things that were rolled out. They didn't actually understand the problems that these people were dealing with. Um, you've got a stabby 30-year-old developing software in an office when is your user a 55-year-old person using a computer for the first time? In a lot of cases, it is, and I don't necessarily understand that. On the construction side, a lot of those projects failed, honestly, because with lack of adoption of technology more broadly, a lot of these initiatives were just trying to digitize an existing process, and you didn't actually realize the benefits of having a digital system. Like as an example, one of the stats we had come across on Qt a long time ago is here in Alberta, where I live and work right now, the oil sands, super expensive labor, really harsh working conditions, especially in the winter. When a project goes long and goes over budget, they feel the pain of that. So there was a lot of interest in the space, but the actual time on tools is only about 30%. So you could double the amount of people you have on a project, but you're waiting on permits, you're waiting on licensing, you're waiting on flights. And if you could tie that information with a digital system together, you can make better decisions. But if all you're trying to do is trying to take your timesheet, that's a paper card, and put it on an iPad, it might be digital, but you're not actually going to realize the benefits of that.
Oh my gosh. So one of the I had really cool career opportunity. So I speak Spanish, and that led to me being able to do customer research in Latin America at my most recent gig. And I went to Peru, and I was looking at a packing house for produce, and the manager of the packing house is walking me through how like blueberries are packaged and how they're prepped for shipment to the States, China, Europe, and super fascinating. And there was this one station. It was kind of like it was kind of I don't know how to put it, but it was really like uh ironic because there was like this one station that was meant for like quality control where they actually like test the grapes like for like sugar content, and it was just a normal table and then like a pad of like worksheets to like write down the quality data, and then like right next to that station was a actual computer workstation where the labels are printed and put on the little clamshells for the blueberries. And I asked him like, "Oh yeah, have you ever like tried digitizing this part of the process?" And the guy's like, "Oh yeah, we have. Like I mean, like the ERP that we have has an iPad app, and we tried it. It's just too slow. And so now we just use the little paper form, and then at the end of the day, our quality assurance team will like key it in to the system because paper is faster. And in this, like when you're doing a bake off of like a normal form field experience on an iPad compared to just shorthand writing it down on paper is always going to be faster. And like that's just so true that like just putting it on an iPad might benefit the business systems, but it doesn't help the actual work happening.
Yep. Your buyer is not your user, and you've got two different people to meet those needs. Sure, it needs to be the right price, and it needs to have the right security and whatnot, but oftentimes that's where the buck stops. And your consumer brands of the world have figured out how important the user experience is because your user is your buyer. You're only one click away from deleting whatever social media account you have. But if your boss is buying your software for you, you don't necessarily have that same leverage or ability to influence their buying decisions. So unless you're being really intentional, as a designer, as a product manager, as an engineer or a software developer, you really have to keep both of those users in mind at any given time when you're creating a product.
So, what does the right approach look like if it's not putting something on an iPad? What have you learned is uh what have you learned from like an effective digital transformation project you worked on? Is there like a happy ending to this oil industry story or
Um, yeah, actually, I mean, um, I can think of one more commercial project that was at the LAX Airport Authority, and I did have an iPad where I was trying to get people to use an iPad for the first time, and yeah, you can't beat a piece of paper, but at the same point, you know, but rather than exchange emails back and forth or maybe a phone call, I just went to site and I shadowed them, because I think the most challenging piece, in any sort of product environment, are user needs. And often, at least for the junior, a lot of folks think that the express needs are the needs that you're actually trying to meet. And they might tell you that I need to be able to do this, but if you see them, they're actual latent needs, those underlying needs. And one of the users that I had who was on this commissioning project, yeah, for a single like timesheet or for a single like kind of commissioning kind of checklist that they were working on, it would make sense to do it on paper. Except what if you're doing that same task for weeks on end? What if you put a lot of work into one of these things and you want to copy it? Oh, well, that's kind of different. Or what if you're in an environment where, and I would see him, he would actually have all the fingers cut off on his gloves so he could use the iPad. And his safety guy on site was like, oh, I don't know about that. And well, we've got this cool feature on the iPads now called dictation. So if you just got, something that's half conductive and put it on the screen, you can actually dictate all your notes rather than writing it out with the chicken scratch that I know no one's going to be able to write afterwards. So, they needed the ability to fill out these things, but you have to frame it in a different way, which is here's a different path to the same goal. I'm not going to compete with the reliability of a pen and paper. It doesn't run out of batteries. It doesn't lose Wi-Fi connectivity. It doesn't force you to update every 3 years because Apple doesn't support the software anymore. There's a whole lot of things that that's good at, but there are other use cases if you truly understand those kind of user needs. On the construction side, a lot of feedback that I've given people because I used to be on, let's say, the latter end of the construction life cycle on the commissioning. And I would do the conference circuit and, people would argue about what's the best commissioning software. Like, there is no best commissioning software. You need a digital platform because if you're only finding these issues, a digital solution is not going to help you if you're already at 90% of the way through the project and you've already realized all those delays. But if you have an entire digital life cycle and you can make sure that you're noticing, let's say design issues early on in the design life cycle, you can get those things resolved before they hit production. It's a lot easier to move an I-beam in your 3D software than trying to move a structural beam in the middle of a job, right? So the earlier you can catch these things, the better, and the more digital your entire process is, the better. And point solutions do really struggle in a lot of cases. They might be able to do with some super specific use cases that really help, but if you really want to adopt digital transformation, it has to be across the entire life cycle of whatever you're trying to do, not just onesie twosie parts and pieces of it.
and why is that? Is it like why can't you just use a bunch of different software tools across the life cycle? Why does it have to be like an end-to-end life cycle in order to provide value with the
Yeah.
software?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on the complexity of the user.
Yeah.
So let's say, I'm the head of product at HealthSim, where we're a payments company or working to be the most loved payments company. A lot of our users are not immediately tech savvy. So while they could choose the best of breed for a bunch of different solutions, whether you use XYZ solution for subscription management, another one for invoicing, you still have to have the technical prowess to actually be able to tie all those things together. So maybe me or you would be a little bit more successful in tying these
Yeah.
together, but as your marginal user, I mean, if you're running a business, your focus is running your business, not necessarily dealing with the update cycles and the integrations and the data issues. Same thing on a construction site. You can find the best in breed for a number of different solutions, but you will be in integration hell. And how do those things really work together? And Microsoft honestly championed that strategy many moons ago. Teams, I don't think is ever really going to outshine Slack, but it comes with your subscription and it works with SharePoint. And a lot of times the buyers in these organizations realize that you don't have to have the best solution from a point standpoint, but if it works well enough together, you can usually realize the benefits that you won't necessarily realize from a bunch of disjointed point solutions.